Now the following assignment that you're going to be responsible for creating, you're going to be taking a antiquated photo. That's a photo that is going to be significantly old, at least minimum of 50 to 75 years old. I'll provide a couple examples that you will have the option of choosing which you would like to perform edits on. So you will have an option. You're not responsible for both. And you're going to be cleaning up those photos as best as you are able to. So I want you to make it as pristine as possible. No dust, no scratches, no blemishes. You're probably going to need to have a really keen eye for detail. Don't just quickly go through it, but spend some time really observing the image. Chances are you're not going to be able to do it all in one go. The way that you're going to be performing these edits is you are going to create a new document first. So I'm going to Command N or Control N for new. Make sure that my setting is set to US paper. I'll say OK. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to place an object. I'm going to go to File, Place, and this is going to be where I select my starting document. Okay. Now this one is a little too small for my document. You can see that it's coming in and it's not quite the right size of my my page. So I would Shift and hold down Option or Alt to scale it up to fit as much of my page as possible. All right. Now the reason I'm doing this in this fashion is for a couple reasons. One, it's going to help retain as much information about that image as possible. To illustrate what I mean by that, I'm going to duplicate this layer and I'm going to rasterize the top layer. So now I have two copies of the same image. All right. Now you'll notice if you take a look at the icon in my layers panel, you will notice that one has a little image or a little icon in the lower right hand corner, and this indicates that this layer is a smart object. Now smart objects are useful for a variety of different reasons, but the biggest reason that I prefer that we all use smart objects for bringing in outside imagery into our document versus just opening it up and working from it outright, there's a couple reasons for that. One of them is that it remembers its pixel ratio more cleanly. So I'll highlight, I'm shift clicking to highlight both of these just to illustrate a point. And I'm going to Command or Control T to show the constrained box for free transform. And I'm going to shrink these. Okay. I'm going to take one, scoot it over a little bit. All right. Now we'll say I had to shrink it and then resize it in order to get it to fit in my document. So I'm going to highlight them both again, Command T, and it helps if I hold down Shift to ensure that the size is good. You can see one went off the screen. I'm just going to drag it back over so that they're close to one another. And then I'm going to Control T again. I'm going to scale it back up. Now you can clearly see the version that is not a smart object has significantly lost the amount of quality that it initially had. It degraded quite a bit. Now the difference between these two, this one, the smart object, it's still not considered vector, but the way it reacts is sort of like a hybrid between a raster image and a vector image, in that it remembers what it was like before you started manipulating it. So part of the reason that I bring all of my documents in as a smart object as opposed to just opening it up and working on it is that it allows for me to A, make sure that I've got a consistent layout, and B, it allows for me to scale up to meet as much space within the image as possible, as much space on my page as possible, versus, I'll go to image size to show you this, versus being what it would have initially been, which was only 2 inches wide by 3.307 inches. I haven't expanded it to the point that I could print it and have it look amazing, but I have improved the quality to the point that if I needed to make it large, at least I'm not hurting it more than it already is. All right, the images that I'll be providing for you are going to be of a higher quality than this sample that I'm giving you anyway. In this lecture, you won't be working on this particular image. All right, so if I were going to perform edits per the assignment, which you will be, again, editing out all the flaws, I want the end product to look as though the original had never been damaged, okay? You aren't responsible for making it look contemporary. It's not going to look like a digital photo that someone took yesterday, but I'd like it to look as though this photo was in a time capsule, essentially, and hasn't been damaged in any way. So I'm going to duplicate, call it my working layer, and I'm going to rasterize it. Now I'm ready to perform some edits. So I'm going to start, again, as with prior samples that I've provided you, I am going to use spot healing with the hardness and the spacing turned all the way off. And I'm going to use that to clean up as much as I can. So I'm working from the smallest to the biggest because I won't be able to restore his head until I can clean up as much as possible from around it. Same thing with Grandma's eye. I don't want to really attempt that until I can clean up as much as possible from what's around it. Keep in mind, if there's areas where there's a seam, that maybe I can't just jump through it and expect it to come out the way that I need it to. Switch to healing brush, pick a region using alter option to source your start point, and then heal it as you go. This tool as well, hardness all the way down, spacing all the way down. You want it to be a nice, smooth brush. In the case of hair, I just am trying to be as careful as I can. Same thing with facial features. Be as careful as you can without editing the face. If it doesn't come out as expected, just be aware of where you're sourcing from. In this instance, the chair leg, even though I'm accidentally grabbing more than I probably should, let's Photoshop back up. I'll pick a higher spot on the chair so it doesn't pick up the damaged regions. Much better. Unfortunately, that fabric's right there. Again, much cleaner. Sometimes you have to take certain regions in more than one step. I'm having to go in and resource my start point several times in order to make sure that I don't skew the leg of this, the leg of this table off too much. Also keep in mind, you have multiple tools at your disposal. Sometimes the patch tool is a nice one to switch to. And I might have to work this area a few times till I can clear it up. It's picking up a lot of the lighter areas and trying to blend them in. I'm just trying to clean it up as much as I can. At some point I might come in with the clone stamp tool and just take care of the edges completely. There we go, clone stamp. Oops, now you can see here, I'm coloring way outside of the bounds of the picture. That's not what I want. If you find that you're coloring outside of the lines too much, a real quick way to kind of select the interior region is to grab your magic wand tool, select the white space. Now right now the white space is what's editable, but if I go up to select and pick inverse, it inverts or reverses where the selection is. So now the photo is selected. So if I come back in with my clone stamp, makes real quick work of those borders that were being a little argumentative. Now, careful, I see how I'm making a duplicate of Grandma here. We don't want that. It's important to resource and then return and make the corrections that you need to. You can also see this dark shape and how I've made a duplicate of it accidentally? These are those things you want to be careful of if you're using the clone stamp tool. If you start getting multiples of flaws, that's an issue. Those are things that I'm going to look for as I'm grading. So you may wish to consider maybe zooming out a little bit as you work to make sure that there isn't a repeating pattern of multiple areas that should only have one instead of many. So like in this region, see I'm starting to grab his shoulder and I could replicate his head easily, but this area is light, so I'm actually needing to source this same area multiple times to clean it up. Fortunately, this background that they have in this image is very forgiving. It almost looks like clouds or trees or something. It's an old-timey photo backdrop. So it's going to work out no matter what I choose to do. But it's worth being careful about the way that you are editing, because it is easier than you would expect to recreate problem areas. Oops, see? Look at what happened right there above his head. Got like a Morse code of dots. We don't want that. It's no good. Now, worth noting that if you have a selection tool and then you switch to the patch tool, you could move quite a bit of the information around. I'm going to cancel that because that's not what I was looking for. So I'm going to Command or Control D to deselect, then patch. Just try to blend. I'll fix his head. I'm just trying to blend this area in as smoothly as possible. The background ended up looking pretty easy, but that's not where it's tricky. It's tricky through faces and restoring something that maybe wasn't there to begin with. The table leg I could make short work of. Clone stamp, continue it. Oops, and it helps if I have the selection again. So click the white space, select inverse. The hotkey on a Mac is Shift Command I. It would be Shift Control I on a PC. Grab clone stamp again. And I might have to do it a couple times. There we go. Nice long table leg. Make my cursor smaller to continue the table over. In this sense, this is a great tool in terms of recreating things that perhaps have been completely edited out. It'll allow for that to be easily recreated, but where there's fabric that's missing, it gets a little bit tricky. I'm going to have to get inventive with the bottom of her dress. Might give content to wear another go and see what it thinks. All right, time to get, ooh, it's a zoom. There we go. Time to get up in the eyeballs. Try to clean her up. Helps if I have proper brush available. Actually, let's try spot healing and see what it does. Sometimes spot healing does a very good job on its own, but not always. So it's worth being careful as you use it, because sometimes it'll give you something like that where you know there's not just supposed to be a dark smudge through the whole thing. Definitely get friendly with your undo key. Healing brush just to get rid of that dark smudge next to her face. Trying, at least. That's better. Maybe continue her eyebrow over a tiny bit. Not too much though. Tiny brushes. Can be very helpful. Now this white portion here I think might be the top of the chair she's sitting in. In cases like this where you don't know what it looked like before, sometimes it's just good to invent. I will be doing a demonstration in the future that you'll see that is going to involve quite a bit of inventing on my part, just to show you how far some people have to go in order to clean up and resolve certain photos that have been heavily damaged. I'm talking like faces are missing, body parts are missing, all kinds of stuff. So this is the arm of the chair she's sitting in, her arm's on top of it. This big thing, I don't know what that is. That's not a part of the chair. Looks like a flaw, or maybe she's holding a pocket watch or something. It looks like it might be that. Hard to tell in these old photos, you know? Switch back to the patch tool. Oops, and again, helps if I remember I have a selection. Deselect, and reselect. That doesn't do such a bad job. You see how I took this wrinkle, I took it from down here and then replaced it up there. Doing the best I can to make it look as realistic as possible without actually being there. Alright, so we've just got her eye, the bottom of the page, his hand, and the top of his head. So with her eye, good old copy and paste can be your best friend. Command or Control C to copy, Command or Control V as in Victor to paste. Move that eye over, edit, transform, flip horizontal, and then free transform to maybe arrange it a little bit. I might use a blending mode to see if I can get it to blend in a little. Not all of these results are going to give me something that's going to work, but it's worth going through and just checking. When in doubt, leave it set to normal, and I just use the eraser tool. Again, hardness turned all the way down, and just softly blend it in. Oops, not too much though. Don't want to erase too much. Just enough to try and get the eye where it should be. Looks like I erased a little too much off the bottom. Close. Close enough, right? Right here, this little triangular area isn't a finger, but it's the background. Gonna clone stamp, and it helps if I'm on the correct layer. Clone stamp this up. Try to clone stamp the background back in. Try to get some of the table in there. Maybe use part of the thumb to recreate the finger. Now it just looks like his finger's kind of curled under. Now I gotta recreate the outside portion of his thumb. It's a long thumb. Probably just make some slight adjustments. Try to get it to blend in, again, as close as I can without it looking artificial. It's getting there. Top of his head. I'm going to kind of use what we used on Grandma's head. I'll call this my eye layer, E-I-E, eye. I'm going to make a selection, copy, helps if I'm on the correct layer, copy, paste, free transform. So I've got, see how I've got the side of his head? I'm just going to turn it just a little bit. And then while it's in my history, I'll paste again more of his head. Just a little more. Shift, hit return, Shift click, select them both, copy, paste, oops, or if it's not doing both at the same time, duplicate layers, because these are all his head. So I'm kind of making a puzzle piece almost of what his head is, and I don't want to make it too high. Oops. Shift click to grab all of them. Just trying to round the top of his head out. But I'm turning his head into almost a puzzle piece in a sense. Make sure that I click sample all layers. Start to blend it all in together. As close as I can. Now, I might get some weird stuff. That's okay. I'm going to just try to get his head as close as possible to where I think it ought to be in terms of shadow and whatnot. I might have to clone stamp the backdrop. All layers. Just to sort of soften it. Don't want him to have a lumpy head, you know. Don't want him to blend into the background too much either. This might be a good job for dodge and burn, just to lighten up, or maybe add shadow to what parts of his head are doing. Pretty close though, right? Now, that bottom region, remember we discussed the content-aware fill option. I'm going to come down to my working layer, make sure that I deselect the white space because I only want it to affect that interior spot. I'm going to give it a try, see what happens. Fill, content aware, let's see what it does. Not too bad. Filled it with more fabric. Now it would just be a matter of me cleaning it up. Again, fabric is easier to fudge than other stuff. Now I might decide I need to clone some shadows in. I might decide I just want to continue certain areas of fabric down. Select inverse and give that a try again. Want to redefine the region down here by her dress and his pant leg. Continue certain wrinkles down a little further, but not entirely false looking. Definitely looks better than the big tear that was there. I might attempt something similar here or continue the sleeve down a little bit in this case. But I'm going to do just a little more touching up And in the next rendition, we are going to do some additional edits to clean up the photo.